Well, today is one of those messages that is either really exciting or incredibly terrifying. So we need to start with a little fun exercise before we jump in. Oh, by the way, the title for today is Sharing My Faith. That's the part that is scary and exciting. The key question is, how do I share my faith with those who don't know God? The key idea is I share my faith with others to fulfill God's purposes. And then there is our key verse, which is taken out of Ephesians chapter 6. Pray also for me that whenever I speak, words may be given to me so that I will fearlessly make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains. Pray that I may declare it fearlessly as I should. Okay? So, we got to do something fun first. So I call this the huge gamble. Okay, I want you to turn and introduce yourself to the people who are sitting around you. Now, I realize that a pastor can lose the congregation, so I don't want you to introduce yourself to someone you came with. It needs to be somebody else. It needs to be somebody else. Stop right there. Don't move. Don't move. Don't move. Stop. Don't move. Don't move. I saw people going back to their seats. Go back to where you were. You cannot sit down. You cannot sit down. You need to go back to where you were. Marilyn, you were on the other side of the aisle over that way. John, you were back 2 rows that way. I think I saw Gretchen heading back for her seat, but that's okay. Okay, here's the deal. First off, I want you to think of something really exciting that happened in your life over the past week, or month, okay? Something fun and exciting. Everybody, you got 15 seconds to think of something fun and exciting, okay? 15 seconds, go. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. This is just you. You can't go back to your seat yet. Oh, you already did. That's all right. I'll get you back there. 10 seconds. Something fun and exciting. 5 seconds. Something fun and exciting. Okay, here's what I want you to do. One of the people that you went and shook hands with that you don't know very well, I know this is tough for you that are very shy. And believe it or not, I am not a very outgoing person. I really am a shy person at heart. You don't believe that, but it's very true. Brenda is way more outgoing than me. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to get up and go to someone that you did not come to church with and that you maybe don't know. Now, for those of you who are very, very shy, I want you to seek out another very shy person, and you need to move fast before someone else comes to you, okay? This is not going to be bad. This is the scary part. So ready, set, go. You have like 7 seconds to get with someone you did not come with today. Everybody has to do this. This is not optional. 6, 5, 4. I see people who are still with people they came with. 3. Okay. Quiet. Stop right there. Okay. Shh. Okay. Quiet right there. Stop. Stop right there. Be quiet, everybody. Stop right there. Here's what you're going to do. One of you is going to be number 1, and one of you is going to be number 2. Look at that person you're with. If there's 3, you're going to have to figure out who's going to be 1.5. You have to figure out who's 1, who's 2. Okay? Do that real quickly. Who's 1 and who's 2? Who's 1, who's 2? You got it figured out? Okay. Number 1, you have 20 seconds to tell number 2 the exciting thing that happened in your life. Ready, set, number 1, go. 5 seconds have gone by. You have 10 seconds. You have 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1, stop. Okay, ready, number 2, you have 20 seconds. Ready, go. Number 2. 5 seconds have gone by. 10 seconds have gone by. You have 5 seconds left. 3, 2, 1, stop. Okay, shake the hand of that person, say thank you very much, and you can go back to your seat now. Okay, go back to your seat. That's it. You can talk more over our fellowship time. Okay. From the front, that was fabulous. Because at first, nobody wanted to get up. Let's face it, we don't like to get out of our comfort zone. None of us do. If I go to a group where I don't know people, believe it or not, I will sit in the back and I'll keep my mouth shut most of the time. That's very true. Brenda will be the one who'll go out and will talk to people and stuff like that. Now, there's a part of me, believe me, you get me started talking, I can't shut up. Which is exactly what you all did. Because as out of your comfort zone as it was, the volume, when I said go, by the time we got to 5 seconds, the volume had gotten to there. By the time we got to 10 seconds, it was to there. By the time we got to 20 seconds, it couldn't get you to be quiet. And then we repeated it again. And part of it is just getting comfortable with that other person in a setting that is not normal. But the second thing was you were talking about something that was exciting to you, something that was important to you. And when you start talking about something that is exciting and something that is important, I just wanted you to see how the conversation can flow with someone that you don't know. And it's not threatening and it's not scary. And if we approach sharing our faith with that in mind, all of a sudden it changes the way that we think of talking about our faith and sharing with what we believe. The Bible tells us, believe it or not, that we are supposed to tell people the good news of Jesus. And here's the response of most people: do I have to? And there's a lot of reasons why people approach it from that way. I don't know what they're doing these days, but I know when I was younger, they said, there's 2 things you don't talk about. And in church, there's 3 things. So what are the 2? What's that? Politics, religion, and the third one is sex. Believe it or not, the very first sermon I preached in Moses Lake as their associate pastor, after I was hired, was on sex. And you would have thought the old people of the church were going to die of a heart attack. I had warned the senior pastor that I was going to do that. And the reason was, I said, look, everybody in this church needs to know if they're younger than the age of 40, that I'm approachable, that we can talk about sex. Because Garrett was a Dutchman who was 62. And he would have died before he had to talk about sex in front of the congregation. I said, this congregation knows that. They need to know that we can talk about anything. And afterwards, gosh, it was kind of exciting. There were horrified people in the church, and there were people going, yes, that was good. But here's the thing. We can talk about the things that either the country and people in general say we shouldn't talk about: religion, politics, or sex. We can talk about all those things, and it is okay. In fact, we're called to talk about them. And one of those things is we need to talk about our faith. And do we have to? Yes, but people don't do things because they have to. They do things because they want to. So anyhow, do we have to? Yes. But that's not the way you get people to do stuff. You do it because they want to do it. And that's what I'm hoping what we're going to see today. Humanly speaking, I saw this as I reworded it, but the Christian faith is one generation, no, so I said humanly speaking, is one generation away from extinction or reaching the entire world. And it all depends on what you and I and other people who follow Christ decide to do. And so, how are we going to look at talking about our faith today? Well, I want us to look at John chapter 9. Now, we're not going to take time to go through it. It's a long chapter. I'm just going to hit some things. So you're going to have to take I'm going to have some scriptures up there and stuff. But I want you to read John chapter 9. and you're going to see what I'm talking about. Here's the experience. There was a guy who was blind from birth, and he has an encounter with Jesus. And we're going to see his encounter from Jesus' perspective, from his perspective, and then we're going to see how it relates to us. So, here it is from Jesus' perspective. So, Jesus is doing the stuff he normally does, and he sees a guy who is blind. Now, I don't know how you could tell how a person was blind back in Jesus' day. Today, you would oftentimes see someone with a cane. You might see them with a seeing eye dog. You might see them by the way that they're holding the arm of a friend who is walking with them. They might wear dark glasses, but even now there's more and more people that don't necessarily wear dark glasses because they can't see. But here's the deal. Jesus saw him. Jesus recognized that guy can't see. And then the question comes up, well, why can't he see? And we're not going to go into that. Jesus used that as a teaching point. But he saw a need. That's important. We'll come back to that in a second as it relates to us. The second thing is Jesus did something about it. He just didn't walk by. And what he did was he made some mud, put it in the guy's eyes, and which seems pretty weird. I mean, can you imagine you're the blind guy? And again, we're going to look at this from his perspective in just a second. But all of a sudden, this guy is putting stuff on my face. You know, it would seem to be a little on the weird side. But anyhow, Jesus is doing something. And then Jesus directs him to do something. And that was, you need to go and wash. And so from Jesus' perspective, he saw the need, and then he did something about it, and then he directed the person what the next step was. So that is this experience of a blind man meeting Jesus. So now let's look at it from the blind person's experience. So he was blind from birth. There are some people who never have had eyesight. There are some people who have lost their eyesight. And then there are some people who don't see well. There's all sorts of a spectrum that would be there. But this guy was blind from birth. And in their culture, that meant that his parents had done something they shouldn't do. They sinned, and God was punishing them through him. And so it was either his parents or his grandparents, and maybe his great-grandparents, because it says that God sometimes carries that punishment on to the third and fourth generation. So here's a little child, blind. Immediately, people would say, that's because of you or you. And if they didn't have the guts to say it, they at least thought it. And so for his whole life, this blind guy thought he was blind as a judgment because of something that one of his ancestors had done, or maybe something that he had done, but he'd been a little baby. You know, he was blind from birth, it says. So anyhow, can't picture how horrible that would have been. And in their culture, you know, not good. So anyhow, he begs every day, and that's the way that he makes his money. And so people are used to seeing the blind guy out there begging. And so he has an encounter with Jesus. Now, he has never seen Jesus. There is no indication that he had ever heard Jesus speak, so he wouldn't recognize Jesus' voice, but he knew that something was happening around him. Stuff always happened around Jesus. And so I imagine the guy was calling out or saying, you know, please give or please help me, something to that effect, and he has an encounter with Jesus. So the crowd stops, and from what I understand, people who are blind, their hearing, they're very focused on their hearing. They can tell. Imagine he could tell that the crowd stopped, and imagine Jesus said something to him. But now all of a sudden, here is a strange person who is putting stuff on my eyes, as people are asking about him, who sinned, him or his parents or his grandparents? this guy doesn't know, but all he knows is this Jesus guy is doing something to me. It's kind of weird, but he's doing something. And then Jesus says, you need to go and wash. And he does. And when he washes, God restores his sight. Now he can see for the first time. So he's got something really exciting to tell people about. So if he was in church today, and this had happened to him yesterday, he would still be talking, even if I said, that's enough, please sit down, because it was so exciting. And so all of a sudden he can see, and it says that he's telling people about it. So anyhow, that is pretty cool that is what is happening with him. But here's the deal. The religious leaders don't like Jesus. And people take this man to them because Jesus healed him on the Sabbath. And so he has an opportunity to share about Jesus. So he's now standing in front of the bigwigs. And so what he does is he tells them what happened. He healed me. And then they start questioning him, and how can he do this? It was on the Sabbath. You're not allowed to do that, and blah, 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 blah. Goes on and on and on and on and on. And so he keeps telling them, he healed me. And then it keeps going on and on. They don't like it. And so what do? They bring his parents in, and they say, is that your son? They said, yes, that is our son. Did Jesus heal him? And they said, he's an adult. He can talk for himself. I mean, they didn't want to get on the bad side of the religious leaders. So that didn't seem to help them out. So they brought this now no longer blind guy back in and said, did Jesus heal? And it goes on and on and on. And the religious leaders didn't like it. And he says, look, he healed me. I don't know if he's a prophet, but man, let me tell you, he healed me. And so anyhow, that little segment ends with that the man believed, and he worshiped. Because he encounters Jesus outside, away from the religious leaders, and he believed and he worshiped. Now you can say, well, wait a second. My faith is, and my experience with Christ isn't so miraculous. It's not, hey, I was blind and now I can see, or as I said in our Sunday school class, in our small group, I was on LSD and now I'm not, or something like that. I had and still have a relatively boring testimony of how I came to know Jesus. I used to say, and I still say, I didn't drink, I didn't chew, and I didn't go out with girls who do. And so I had, I looked at my friends, and some of them had very exciting stories of how they came to know Christ and things like that, and mine was just dull and boring. And I just felt how mundane. No one wants to hear my story. Until I found out that, something? Most people were more like me than the guy I knew who was doing drugs and came to know Christ while he was doing drugs. The guy who I know and was it's not Carl, was one of the youth leaders in our youth group. We have a friend who was very instrumental in my life when I came to know Christ. But his name was Tab Morgan, and he was a drugger and a stoner, and he came to know Jesus, and Young Life had either the excitement or the craziness of asking him to go up to Malibu to be one of their counselors. And Malibu is a Young Life camp up in Canada, and it's just, I've never been there. It's gorgeous and fabulous. And God arranged it so that every kid in his cabin, every boy, was a guy who was doing drugs. Every single one. And they thought that they got this youth leader who was just, right off, they say, falling off the turnip truck, that they'd be able to pull a fast one over him. Well, the first time after they went out and snuck out and were smoking dope out in the woods, when they're getting ready to go out the next time, Tab just said, do you guys really want to go out there and smoke your dope? And they thought that they'd fooled him. And he was able to tell them his experience of how he'd been very involved in the drug culture and how he was the one who used to sneak out and smoke pot, and how he then got to where he was doing much more than that. And by the end of the week, every boy in his cabin prayed to receive Christ. See, God needed him to be the counselor at that place because he had the right story. If Lance had been there, Lance had the right story, but not for that group. I could have said, I know what you're doing, but man, my story is so powerful. I was a good kid, and they would have just looked at me like, who is this guy? And so when it comes to you sharing your faith, there are people who are just like you out there. They've experienced the same good that you've experienced. They've experienced the same challenges that you've experienced. And so your story is the right story for some people at the right time. And the difference that makes is life-changing. And so I just want you to know that if you love Jesus, God is going to use you to impact people's lives. And you don't have to necessarily be the person who's going to stand on the street corner or going to be a pastor up front, but it's just living amongst people and being with them, and as they're experiencing the things that they're experiencing, that you live with them and you share with them and you live as Christ's presence in that setting. Now, some people here have gone through some pretty horrible stuff in their lives, and oftentimes we don't like to talk about it. As I shared in my small group, a gal who used to work with a youth group that I was working with before I was ordained, she had had an abortion when she was in high school. Her parents made her have an abortion, and she felt like she had killed a kid. And she had not told anybody outside of her family. And we were at a leadership retreat, and I don't even know how Jamie felt comfortable enough to share, but she did. And she didn't tell the whole group. She told me. And, Brenda and I and Jamie were friends at the time and all of that. And in tears, she told me how she felt that she had killed a child when she had the abortion that her parents made her have when she was 17 years old. And she didn't know how she could be a youth leader having done that. And so we talked and we prayed, and I said, is that the unforgivable sin? And she said, no. I said, you've been forgiven. That sin has been covered by the blood of Jesus. And God's using you in young ladies' lives, and that is so important. Your story is the right one, at the right place, in the right time, and you're making a difference in young ladies' lives. Little would I know that less than a couple months later, I got a phone call late at night, 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I never, like I said, I was not a wild person, so that was late at night. And it was a young gal from our high school youth group. She had had an abortion a couple days earlier that her parents had said, you will go and you'll get this done. And she did. And she didn't know what to do. Again, she was confused. She didn't know if she had killed a person or what. And she did not know what to do. I had permission from Jamie that I could direct people to her. And this young gal's name was Sue. And I got permission, and I said, Sue, you need to talk to Jamie. And if it is okay, when we hang up, we didn't have texting in those days. There was a day where there was no texting. And I said, I'm going to have Jamie call you. I hung up with Sue, called Jamie. Miraculously, joke, God had her there to answer the phone. We hung up. She called Sue. A youth leader who thought that she had killed a person and couldn't be used by God was used by God to talk to a young gal who just thought that she had done practically the unforgivable thing. Jamie's story was the right story at the right time for a young lady. Now, I don't know the end of the story. I know that they continued to, Sue was, anyhow, through our time there until she graduated from high school and all of that, they were very good friends. God used a particular story at a particular time